She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't throw anything. She just set down her glass, walked out of the room she had spent 13 years building, and let the man who stole it stand in her spotlight for exactly 14 more days. Because Seren Voss didn't believe in burning things down. She believed in something far more dangerous. She believed in waiting until she could take it all back, with receipts. The night Seren Voss was supposed to win everything is the night she lost it all. 2,000 people were applauding inside that ballroom. The kind of applause that shakes the floor. The kind that makes your chest tight not from pride, but from the sheer accumulated weight of everything it took to get there. 13 years. That's what was in that room. 13 years of 12-hour days and takeout containers and conversations she wasn't present for and flights she slept through and a version of herself she had packed away in a box marked later because the company always came first. And later had finally arrived. She could feel it. Standing at the back of her own gala in a room full of people who had watched her build this thing from nothing, she could feel the specific electricity of a moment that is about to become a memory. The MC's voice echoed across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Voss Mercer Industries. One pause. Half a second. The kind of pause that a body registers before a mind does. Mr. Daniel Mercer. The applause erupted. And the smile on Seren's face, it didn't fall. It didn't crack. It didn't do anything dramatic or cinematic or satisfying. It simply stopped. Like a clock that has been unplugged. She looked down at the program in her hand. Chief Strategy Officer, Seren Voss. Except her name had been removed. His doubled. She didn't throw the glass. That's the thing about Seren Voss. She never threw the glass. She set it down. Quietly. Precisely. The way she did everything. And she walked out of the room she built. It wasn't always like this. 5 years ago it was just a whiteboard and a dream she couldn't quite afford to have. A rented desk in a co-working space in the meatpacking district. A lease agreement with a coffee ring on the signature page. A blazer that was slightly too big because she'd bought it secondhand and hadn't had time to get it tailored. That was the version of Seren that met Daniel Mercer. He was at a venture capital pitch night, the kind of event where everyone is performing confidence for everyone else. He was the loudest person in the room. All jawline and certainty and sentences that landed like predictions. She was the smartest. They had both clocked this about each other in the first 5 minutes. He found her by the drinks table afterward and said, without preamble, "What are you building?" And she told him. All of it. The technology, the roadmap, the market gap she had identified that no one else had moved on yet because it required a specific combination of technical precision and strategic vision that most people simply didn't have. He listened. Really listened. The kind of listening that feels like a form of respect. And when she finished, he said, "The technology is ready. What you need is someone who knows how to make people believe before they can see it." She looked at him. "Lucky for you," he said, "belief is literally all I sell." They built Voss Mercer Industries in 18 months. Flat-pack desks and whiteboard diagrams and takeout containers, and the particular intimacy of two people sharing a vision that the rest of the world hasn't caught up to yet. The relationship had crept up on her the way important things do. Not a thunderclap. A tide. She had looked up one Tuesday evening, his hand on her shoulder as she walked him through the Q3 projections, and thought, simply and with no fanfare at all, "Oh, it's you." She had trusted him with the company the same way she had trusted him with everything else. Completely. Without a contract for either. 6 weeks before the gala, Seren found the discrepancy by accident. She wasn't looking for it. That's the thing that would keep her up at night for weeks afterward. She wasn't looking. She had been reviewing a routine restructuring proposal, the kind of document that comes through quarterly, the kind she usually signed off on without reading every line because she trusted the process and the people in it. But something snagged her eye. A number that didn't match. A single paragraph buried on page 22 of a 37-page shareholder agreement amendment. A quiet, procedural, surgically precise paragraph that shifted the controlling stake of Voss Mercer Industries from a 50-50 split to a 67-33. In Daniel's favor. She closed the laptop. Opened it again. Read it 3 more times. Then she called Marcus, their CFO. The one person at the company she trusted with the version of herself that was afraid. Tell me I'm reading this wrong. Silence. Tell me I'm reading this wrong, Marcus. Seren. I found out 3 days ago, he said finally. I've been trying to figure out how to. She hung up. Not out of anger. Out of the sudden nauseating understanding that 3 days was long enough to tell her. And he hadn't. She stood at her window for a long time after that. The city below her, indifferent and constant. The kind of view you spend years working toward and then barely notice anymore because you've already moved on to the next target. She had built this. All of it. And somewhere between the whiteboard and the 43rd floor, she had stopped reading the documents. Seren's attorney, Olivia Park, had the particular expression of a woman who delivers terrible news for a living, precise, direct, and completely without cruelty. The restructuring was filed 10 days ago, Olivia said. The board ratified it in a closed session, which, to be transparent, they had the procedural right to do under a clause in your original partnership agreement. The clause I didn't know existed. The clause Daniel's counsel added during the Series B amendment. You signed it, Seren. Along with 37 other pages. Seren folded the corner of a piece of paper in her lap. Precisely. Over and over. What can I do? The legitimate options are limited. A challenge would take 18 to 24 months. By which point the Caldera acquisition closes, Daniel consolidates the board, and your leverage evaporates entirely. And the not entirely legitimate options? A pause. A careful, almost smile. Those aren't options I can advise you on. She rode the elevator down alone. The mirrored walls reflected her back at herself from every angle. The coat, the bag, the expression that gave nothing away. She watched her own reflection the way you watch a stranger. She had the technology. She had the institutional knowledge. She had the client relationships, the development roadmap, the actual architecture of everything the company had been built on. What she needed was leverage. And leverage, in her world, had exactly one source. She pulled out her phone. Scrolled to a name she had never once allowed herself to call. Don't make me do this. She pressed call. The city was doing what cities do, moving, indifferent, brilliant. Office buildings lighting up floor by floor in the dusk like dominoes falling in slow motion. Rain beginning fine and mean, the kind that soaks you before you've registered it's raining. Her car moving through traffic. The city smearing gold and red through the fogged glass. There's a particular loneliness to being inside a crisis that no one around you can see. Every car in traffic, every lit window, every person walking fast with their head down against the rain, all of them going somewhere, none of them knowing. Seren had built her entire career on the premise that information was the only real currency. That the person who knew more, prepared better, and moved faster would always win. She had forgotten, somewhere along the way, that the same rule applied to the people standing next to her. She would not forget it again. He was already there when she arrived. Reed Calloway sat at the far end of the bar with the relaxed posture of a man who believes, correctly, that he can afford to wait. 39. The kind of face that had once been boyish and was now something harder and more interesting for the wearer. They had spent 3 years fighting each other in boardrooms, funding rounds, and every industry panel where their companies were positioned as natural rivals. She had loathed him with a precision that had occasionally alarmed her. You called me, he said, without preamble. I'm aware. You've never called me. I'm also aware of that. He studied her for a moment. Then, Daniel filed with Caldera independently. Without you. She didn't answer. The silence was the answer. He's going to close the acquisition in 6 weeks, she said. When he does, he controls the company I built. The board he stacked will push me out within the quarter. And you want my help? I want your client list. The 3 Caldera subsidiaries you have relationships with, the ones that haven't committed yet. You want me to poison the deal. I want you to let me save it. Properly. The way it should have been done. She held his gaze. I'll give you the technical IP you've been trying to replicate for 2 years. Full licensing. No litigation. He was quiet for a moment. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. No hesitation. But you know I built what Daniel is selling. You know the difference between the pitch and the product. And you know that without me, the product doesn't exist. The ice shifted in his glass. You have 48 hours, he said. I know. 26 hours in, Marcus called. Seren. Daniel knows you met with Calloway. He's calling an emergency board session tomorrow morning. He's going to move to revoke your access credentials before you can. How does he know? A pause. I don't know. She knew. The shape of that particular silence had a weight she recognized. Marcus. Did you tell him? A longer pause. He offered me the VP position. The one I've been. Stop. Her voice was very quiet. The kind of quiet that is the opposite of small. Just stop. She sat with the phone against her cheek for a long moment after he went silent, listening to the city outside. Someone else's life going on at full volume beyond her window. She hung up. And then she did something she had not allowed herself to do in a very long time. She cried. Briefly. Completely. The way you let yourself when you know you cannot afford to do it twice. The kind of crying that isn't about sadness, it's about recalibration. The body's way of flushing out everything that is no longer useful so you can move. She stood at the bathroom sink afterward, hands braced on the edges, and looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. The woman looking back was furious. And grief-worn. And absolutely terribly awake. She had 15 hours. She called Reed at 3 a.m. He picked up on the second ring, which told her everything she needed to know about what kind of man he was. What happened? He knows. Board session at 9. We don't have 48 hours, we have 6. A beat. Then the sound of movement. Reed, standing up, already thinking. Ortega at Caldera Pacific, she owes me a conversation. I'll call her at 7 her time. That's not enough. No, it's not. A pause. Get me the original technical specifications. The architecture documents from the first 3 years, the ones Daniel doesn't have access to because you kept them on your personal servers. How did you know about those? A beat. Something careful in his voice. Because if I were you, that's what I would have done. She opened a digital archive she hadn't touched in 2 years. Folder after folder of her own work. Her own handwriting on the scanned documents. The actual proof, the original proof of everything she had ever made. She transferred them. She did not hesitate. The strange thing was, and she would not understand this for days, trusting Reed Calloway at 3 a.m. in the dark felt different from how trusting Daniel had felt at the beginning. With Daniel, she had trusted him the way you trust gravity. Automatically. Without thinking to question it. With Reed, she was choosing. Eyes open. Risk fully visible. There was something almost like relief in that. The board session was meant to start at 9:15 a.m. At 9:08, Seren walked in. She had not been invited. She walked in anyway. Coat still on. Folder in hand. The kind of entrance that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. Daniel's smile arrived a fraction of a second after his eyes, the detail she had never once let herself examine while she loved him. Seren. You weren't. Sit down, Daniel. The room went very still. No one in that room was accustomed to hearing him told to sit down. Caldera Pacific withdrew from the acquisition 11 minutes ago. Caldera Southeast is reconsidering. She set the folder on the table. The board has now received the original IP architecture documents demonstrating that the core technology, the specific technology this entire deal is predicated on, was developed entirely before your involvement in the Series B restructuring. Meaning the IP is mine. You don't have the standing to. I have Reed Calloway's legal team and 47 pages of technical authorship documentation. She looked at him. Not with anger. Not with grief. With something colder and more final than either. You took the company I built. You did it carefully and you did it slowly, and I didn't see it because I was too busy building it. Her voice did not break. That was the most devastating thing in the room. But you made one mistake. He was very still. What? You forgot that I'm better at this than you are. She picked up her folder. She walked out. In the hallway, glass walls, the city blazing 40 floors below, Reed was waiting. He looked at her face and didn't ask a single question. He just nodded. Ortega? Called me directly. They're out. Then it's done. They stood there, both of them, in the particular strange quiet of a war that has just ended. The silence between them had a different texture now. Not a battlefield. Something else. "I need you to know," she said. "I would have done this without you." "I know," he said. "Then why did you help me?" He was quiet for a moment. Outside the glass, the city was very bright. "Because I've been watching you build that company for 3 years. And I wanted to see what you'd do when it was on the line. A beat. You didn't burn it down." Seren looked at him. "I came close." 2 weeks later. Her office. Properly, legally, permanently hers. Her name on the door. Just her name. The board had restructured. The IP had been reclassified. The acquisition had been renegotiated on her terms, with her name attached, with the architecture that had always belonged to her. Daniel had resigned in an email. 3 lines. She had read it once, deleted it, and made herself a cup of coffee. She sat at her desk that evening with her original notes spread out in front of her, the handwritten architecture sketches from 5 years ago, the whiteboard diagrams she had photographed on her phone at midnight, the margin notes in her own impossible handwriting. Evidence of a woman who had, quietly, made something from nothing. She asked herself, in the days after, whether she was angry. Whether what she felt qualified as rage or grief, or the particular hollow echo of a life spent building a table that someone else kept sitting at. What she found, when she sat with it honestly, was something she had no clean word for. Not triumph. Not relief. Something quieter than both. She thought about the way Reed had picked up at 3 a.m. The way he had said "I know" to every version of her that night, the afraid one, the furious one, the one who would have done it without him, and had meant all 3. She didn't know what that was yet. She picked up the champagne flute from the gala. She'd taken it that night, slipped it into her bag without quite knowing why. It sat on her desk now. Ordinary glass. Ordinary weight. She turned it in her hands. She had built this. All of it. The company, the technology, the reputation, the war she'd just won. She had also built, without realizing it, a life where the most important relationship she had, the one she'd called love and meant it, had been, at its center, a transaction she had never been told the terms of. That was the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just take what it takes. It makes you doubt everything you were sure of. Every instinct. Every yes. Every moment you looked at another person and thought, "I know you." She set the glass down. Stood. Walked to the window. The city spread out below her, vast, brilliant, completely indifferent, the way it always had been. The way it always would be. The glass had always been hers. She had simply spent 5 years forgetting to look through it. Fade to black. She never threw the glass.